how you deal with it. So these are some of the problems if you're an adult with autism. It's very difficult dealing with officialdom. If you have a very set way of doing things, of looking at life, then the flexibility you get when dealing with the health service or the government is very difficult. You often, autism is characterized by problems with understanding your own body, how you're feeling. A lot of children with autism, when I speak to parents, that say, well, he'll go outside in the freezing cold, in the snow, with no coat on, no shoes on. He doesn't seem to understand the pain that he's feeling. And that's the same for adults with autism. Isolation is a problem. As you're growing older, you become more and more isolated. And you have the same sensory issues and problems communicating your needs. I did some research a while back, a few years ago, with people in their 50s and 60s that had just received a diagnosis of autism. For 90% of these people, that was a very positive experience. Suddenly they realised why they were having lots of problems in their life. All of these adults described their childhood as pretty horrendous. They didn't have friends, they found it very difficult to integrate with people, and they all referred to themselves as alien. They felt that they were not human beings because, if you have autism, you don't know you have autism, you're doing your best, you're trying to get along in life, and everything is falling apart for you because you don't understand why people won't be friends with you, why people are getting kind of upset when you tell them something straight, you don't kind of sugarcoat it. That's very, very difficult. So it can be a very positive experience. I'm not going to read this, but this is from one of the participants in the study. And this participant, after she realised she had autism, she started keeping a diary of feelings. And she was at a friend's house and she broke one of her friend's favourite cups. And she said, oh, I'm feeling something. What is this? I just broken your cup. And her friend said, oh, you probably feel guilty for breaking my cup. And she went, yeah, that's it. Great. Write it down in the diary. This feeling is guilt. And now I can go back through my life and understand all of those other times that I felt guilt and I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a word for it. When I felt happiness, when I felt sadness. So it can be a very liberating, I think, experience. A lot of adults realise they have autism when their child has been diagnosed with autism. They start thinking, well, actually I was like that when I was a child. I have these types of problems. I'm very sensitive to smell and sound and noise. And that's when they start seeking out a diagnosis. Okay, the last point then is looking at ethnicity. So I think this is really important. There are very few papers on ethnicity and autism. When we were conducting the research that we recently conducted, looking at the experience of the British Indian community, we could only find one other paper that had studied the British Indian community. And that's terrible. There are thousands of papers written on autism, but the experience of culture and ethnicity are often missed out. So it's important because ethnicity influences the diagnostic process. It may restrain you from seeking a diagnosis. Different ethnic groups have different experiences of development and when children should reach certain milestones. Oops, gone blank again. Stigma can also influence parents of children with autism. I remember doing a phone-in program a couple of years ago on BBC Asian network, and there was a lot of parents phoning in talking about how embarrassed they felt when they learnt they had a child with autism, or how the family hadn't supported them immediately with their child with autism. So these are things that we need to understand and try and change, I think. I'm just going to flip through this. Interaction with service providers can be difficult. If you're coming from different cultures, you may have very different ways of seeing children, child development, and that can be a quite negative aspect. If someone isn't really listening to you, they're not really understanding your concerns, you may kind of withdraw from the whole process. Okay. These are, I think, you were mentioning earlier, 1 in 54? 1 in 54 children have autism. That is probably an underestimate. It's probably higher than 1 in 54. This is some figures from a very recent study, I think 2020, 2021, surveying 7 million school children. And you can see we still have problems here. If you look at this column, girls, if you're a girl with autism, it's very, very unlikely you are going to be picked up. And this is very problematic because the difference between girls and boys with autism, the numerical difference, is probably not as great as we think it is. So we're missing a lot of girls with autism. And interestingly, I think here, if you're from the black community, you're probably being overdiagnosed now with autism. From the Asian community, you're being underdiagnosed with autism. So it's still a long way to go. The final slide then, this is a paper that we published actually, it came out I think a couple of weeks ago. We were looking at British Indian parents with children with autism and just comparing them to white British parents, just to see whether there were differences. What we found is very small. What we found was if you're a British Indian parent, then the concern about autism, is my child having a problem, is happening around 14 months later than if you're a white British parent. And diagnosis is happening around 20 months later. Now that may not seem a lot, 14 months, 20 months, but we know that the earliest, if you can put intervention in at the earliest possible moment, that can have very beneficial effects on the child. You can really help the child by intervention programs at a young age. The British Indian parents had lower mental health. They scored lower on mental health measures. They scored higher on stress measures. And also lower on social support. So British Indian parents were kind of telling us that they weren't getting support from the community or family as much as other parents. However, British Indian parents had much higher resilience levels. They were much better at dealing with the problems parents with autism face. And if you have a child with autism, you know it's a very particular disorder, and it can be a very challenging disorder. When we compare parents who have children with autism with parents with children with other disabilities, such as Down syndrome or ADHD, having a child with autism is much, much more difficult. Okay. Yeah, it just popped up there, but there was no difference in stigma. So the experience of stigma in the British Indian community was no different to the white British community, which is, stigma is still there, but it's not a very drastic, it's not having a drastic impact. So, I'm not going to read this. One of the things that's really impressed me being here this evening is just how positive you are about autism. Just listening to the language that you're using. Autism is difficult. It's always going to be difficult if you have autism, but it's not impossible. You can do incredible things, or you can just do normal things and have normal jobs and normal lives and normal families. But you can do those things. You can achieve those things. A lot of the things stopping you at the moment is the rest of us, society, because we don't understand what you need, when you need it, and we often make life much, much more difficult for you than it should be. I mean, I say to students now when I'm teaching, I say to students, look, if you want to come in and you want to wear headphones or ear defenders or noise cancelling stuff, if you want to sit at the back and stim throughout space and be comfortable in this space. And that's the way, I think, to succeed. So that's the end. Thanks for listening. I don't know if I take any questions, but thank you. Yeah. One of the important points.
My name is Dr. Vishwanath. One of the very important points you asked in the end, you mentioned, is that the awareness among the general public is less. How do we integrate this? And for example, and the children, when an autistic child goes to a group session or anywhere, the other children, they want to talk. They will come to the child, they'll come and try to speak like any other, but this child doesn't respond. So they go away because this child is not responding, not playing with us, and they just go away and they don't become friends. So is there any way we can integrate this by bringing the uh, uh, bringing the neurotypical kids to the schools, autistic schools, for example, as a day visit and see how they do, why they can't interact. And similarly, the other way may not be possible, but getting the awareness among the neurotypical children or the general public is more important. And that is where the acceptance will be.
Yeah. Is that working now? Maybe it's easier at this stage. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. A lot of resources goes into trying to change kids with autism. You know, make them better at this or make them not do this, and not much of this. The resources goes into educating typically developing children about autism, and I think that's what we need to do. But a while back, I did some research on first impressions, and it showed that children often see children with autism as negative. They rate them negatively, even if they don't know they have autism. And one of the reasons for that is to do with lack of facial expressivity or strange facial expressivity. And I presented this at a conference, this paper, and someone, a very well-known autism researcher, came up to me and said, well, we have to train the kids with autism to do facial expressions. And I thought, that's a bizarre thing. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You have to train the other children to accept this. And in a past life, I mean, I've only been doing this for 11 years, but in a past life I worked in theatre, and I did a lot of work with children in schools that had behavioural difficulties, and you can do really amazing work with children and open them to these new experiences. So I think, yeah, that's the answer. I always think there's, if you work in a school, you're probably overworked and you probably don't have a lot of money. But yeah, I think it's better that we educate other children to accept children with autism than try and change the children with autism.
Dr. Steg, thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And the detailed information on autism. The word used in the beginning was autism is a neurological disorder. My questions, there are 2-3 sub-questions as well. Can that disorder be brought back into order, full order? If not, how it can be controlled? And for controlling mechanism, most important it seems that rather than the victim or person suffering from autism, the parents or the carers needs to be taught carefully how to care them, how to teach them, how to behave with them. And final question is, you talked about British Asians. Any chance of adding in your research, why not so many papers on British Indians and how it can be done to bring it into line like any other community?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. On the last point first, I mean, if you have my email, just email me and say, look, we need research on this. I'll do it. A lot of my research is from people just emailing me. I've done some research on meltdowns in adults. I didn't know they existed. Someone emailed me saying, I'm an adult. How do I find information about meltdowns? I had to look for papers. Not a single paper on meltdowns in adults. On your first question, I think we have to kind of get away from this idea of needing to change children with autism, and I think the way of thinking at the moment is is this kind of neurotypical brain, and autism is a very different structured brain, but it's not a bad brain. It's not at fault, and you have this kind of very often beautiful insight if you have autism about things in the world that the rest of us don't see. Simon Baron-Cohen, very famous autism researcher, makes the argument that if we could cure autism, then we probably wouldn't have had Einstein. We wouldn't have thinkers that can see the whole kind of universe in a completely different way. So I think it's very tempting, I think, with children to say, you have to fit in, you have to do it this way. Someone removed someone because they were making some noise. I don't care, it doesn't matter. And I think if we allow children with autism to develop in the way they wish to develop, they will be stronger, more secure adolescents and adults, and they will achieve great things. I mean, I'll tell you a story. When I was doing the work with adults, I met this guy, and I was interviewing him, and he said, well, meet me at this hotel lobby. And when I got there, I said, well, how do I know who you are? And he said, I'm the guy in the lobby that looks like Gandalf. And I walked in, and there he was. He had this flowing white hair, this huge white beard. And he was the most fascinating person. He's a millionaire. He invented, in his early 20s, I think, a chess game, and sold his company and became a millionaire. A fascinating guy, but, very autistic. He was having problems with his relationship with his wife, and he wanted a divorce. Instead of asking for a divorce, he decided he would move to France on the basis that his wife probably wouldn't want to go with him, and that would be the natural divorce. Unfortunately for him, she went with him, and they're still together, and he still hasn't told her. But you can achieve. I think autistic individuals can achieve these incredible outcomes. But also, I don't want to labor that, because, as I said, they can achieve just normal, average, like the rest of us, outcomes, and that's good too. So I don't think we should try and change children with autism. We should always try and understand why things are happening. Why is this child suddenly having a meltdown at this point? Why won't they do X? Why will they do Y? Those types of things. That's my answer. I can't hear you. Just shout at me. There are training systems for parents, but they're very difficult to instigate. They take many, many hours. I went to a talk once where, who was it by? I think it was Patricia Howland, who was talking about all of the kind of weird and strange things parents do to try to help or cure their kids with autism. They're always detrimental. I think patience and time is a good thing, and being positive. I mean, I met a parent once who said, well, he has these quirks, he has these oddities, but he's excellent at maths, and one day he's going to make us a lot of money. So that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of very rich, talented people in the world that we suspect. You know, people like Bill Gates have autism. Yeah. Okay. I don't think, just from the kind of my knowledge of the area, I don't think there's any good research showing that that's the case. A lot of the reasons why there is an increase in autism is just people know more about autism. They spot it. As I said, there is probably thousands and thousands of people in their 50s and 60s who have autism that will never get a diagnosis. So, you know, if you don't know what you're looking for, then especially if you're a parent who has autism, but you don't have a diagnosis, you have a child that has autism, you just think, well, I was like that when I was a kid. He'll do fine, she'll do fine. So I think that's, I mean, there are papers saying that there is a percentage that we can't explain, but it's mainly to do with changes in the diagnostic criteria and just people being much, much more aware of what autism is. When you get to that end of autism where you have a child that is doing really well at school, is very bright, very intelligent, they're the group that I think for a very long time have been missed, that just weren't being diagnosed. So I think that's why. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay. There are a few more questions, but I will give flashcard, write it down. We'll pass it to the doctor, and we continue with the more speakers. Is that all right? Thank you.
I'm sure there's more talented people than me to come up
And we will definitely share doctor's email address, and we are here to help INC. There are so many professionals here. We are working from bottom of our heart for our Indian community and all the autistic people. All, doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter what background it is, what race it is, but we are here for them. So we will be in touch. We are family.
Right, many interesting concepts and tidbits to take home and think about, I'm sure. A lot of educational points made there for us all. Now I'd like to invite Mrs. Fauzia Govender, who is the head teacher of a autism special school. She has over 3 decades of experience working with special education needs or disability background children. She has presented papers on special needs and at international conferences at Cape Town, Sydney, Australia, Montreal, Maastricht, and Edinburgh. Her passion is making a difference, so please, with a loud round of applause, welcome her to stage.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I think I'll copy the doctor and not use the mic. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? I'm always wary of PowerPoints, but nevertheless, as you know, I'm Fauzia. And what I'm going to tell you today is more of what's happening on the grounds. It's lovely to have all this research that's coming up, that should be coming up, because there's a wealth of stuff that still needs to be done. So, as you know, I am a head teacher, and what I've noticed over the years, when I started in special needs, we didn't even know the term autism. At those times in the 70s, coming in to school. More and more students with autism, more and more students complex, right? Those children that we could hear that are articulate, I think are put in mainstream schools. There is no place. Right? The question I ask is, why so many, number one? It's a very good question the doctor there had asked. Perhaps there is an increase of awareness, yeah? But what struck me is more and more of them are not able to use the toilet, are running around, have no concept, and I come from a secondary school. It brings in a lot of issues with staffing. What is happening at primary school? It was easy for my staff to say, they don't know behavior training programs. They should have like us, or something's not happening there. And it was easy to point out. But in order to really know what is happening, we had to dig deeper. Is it the fault of the primary educators? Or is it something that we are missing? And what I'm going to, yeah? So, let's look at parenting. These children come to us when they are 11 years. At 11 years, no, they're not toilet trained. Some maybe are able to communicate, but most of them signing or symbols and so forth, and that's fine. That's a mode of communication. However, most of them cannot eat, use a fork and knife, or even with their hands. There's so many things I could go on. Now let's look at parenting. Parenting in the 21st century is very difficult. It's daunting, it's challenging. It's not like how my grandparents or my parents brought me up. It is the changes, the technology is challenging. Now, parenting a child with autism is even more difficult. You know, you find that the whole family has to change. And as we know, there's an increase of autism in the West. And today, what I want to tell you, the child born in an Indian family experiences life differently from the West, from the children born with British people, not British Indian. So a British Indian child with autism experiences life differently. Now you would say, how is that? I've just told you so many. Now I've spent a lot of time in India, but I've spent Sri Lanka in a special school. And everybody is aware of it, right? The infrastructures are not there. So of course, diagnosis is late. So you might turn around and say, but here in UK, early diagnosis should be no problem for Indian parents. It's not as simplistic as that. You know? And you may ask why. Now, most of us here understand that the birth of a child in any ethnicity is a time for great celebrations, right? Even actually before the baby is born. Take the Indian family. Even before the baby is born, we have rituals, we have customs, the breaking of the coconut at a certain month. My granddaughter is actually here today, and my mum actually came for her great-granddaughter's birth when, from South Africa, because it's a time for celebrations. Yeah? When a baby is born, you have chachi, it's called, or christening, where you, father's sister, and I'm saying this because I want us to process the kind of information, the kind of rituals and the tradition that goes in the birth of this baby. The father's sister in some families would put certain clothes, gifts are exchanged. I actually got gold bangles when my child was born. So it's different things, and it's time for celebrations. Now, let's look at, as you read that, what has happened then with these various rituals. The baby grows up. At 2-3 years, sometimes you would notice the child is playing by themselves. You would notice that they are not able to speak. But Indian families usually, because a birth of a child usually would say, so-and-so was like, and actually they actually ignore that. Or if they are, there is, it puts in the back of the child goes to nursery. Professionals might bring it. Now I'm talking about the Indian family in the UK. At nursery, professionals might say, yes, there's something wrong. And it starts slowly dawning because parents have an idea, but because we all feel that we rationalize, that's part of the Indian culture. Now, I'm not saying every Indian family. Let's be honest, because we want the best. The birth of a child has brought all this joy, and we have to look at our culture, the culture that plays an important part in how we perceive what's happening in our family. You would find that when the child is birthed, when the child is not perfect. Now let's talk about perfect, what perfect means in society. In society, a eugenous society, you need to have a perfect skin, perfect figure. And the birth of a child that does not look, and I'm going to use the word normal, I don't normally use the word normal, but I'm using normal. How do you feel? There is a stigma attached. Right? Yes, many people will accept it, but many, and those that are coming, and I've spoken to families, yeah, there is that feeling, that taboo, there is something wrong. Is it something wrong with them? The other concept that comes through is about karma. Indian families feel that, was this my bad karma? Is it karma? On the other side of the coin, it would be that I have to accept this is God's gift. And we allow the child to grow up as they are. Now, if you work with autistic children, if you know autistic children, they learn the habits very quickly. They're too smart, right? They're too smart. If you don't put it, and if you don't know, because you don't know, you are going through your emotions. Yeah? You're going through the emotions of grieving, the loss of a perfect child, the loss of the ideal child, those emotions of grief, blaming, go to temples, because many people have said, and priests have said that, partly due to ignorance, we can cure. You have to keep fast on Mondays and certain days, you keep fast. Or the Muslim goes to the mosque. There's so many things people do. What is happening at all this time? Valuable time is lost. And we heard earlier on about early intervention, right? In that time where we are shopping around for the perfect cure, when we are getting in touch with our own emotions and we haven't reached acceptance stage, we have not reached it, valuable time is lost. The time where structures supposed to be put in place, the time where the child learns these are the norms, right? We are not here to fix the child in terms of curing them. No. As Dr. pointed out, it's about we, the neurotypical people, need to change our environment. But what is happening? Lost time. So we still have not reached the time where here in the UK you need EHCPs. Okay? So, what I have told you about is the birth of a child, celebration, we have rituals, we have customs, and that delays the whole thing, right? Then we have go through the emotions when we have the diagnosis. Right? What is happening? Valuable time is lost. Now, so you would say, okay, they are in the UK, diagnosis, then what next? That's the part that takes a long time. Our history, and I'm going to be very open here, if you look at Indian history, usually, and I'm saying using the word usually, we are accepting of authority. When a child is diagnosed, here in this country, to get the provision in place, you need what is called an EHCP. Yeah? And the EHCP is the healthcare plan. It's like the child's passport. It tells the child's need. But to get that is not easy. And I know many parents, without it, they don't know where to go and navigate the whole bureaucracy. Yeah? Local authorities look after schools, but right now, at this moment in time, local authorities are flooded. It's a mess. So, the child born of Indian parents, they are accepting. They don't have the paperwork, and when they do have the paperwork, and when you read it, because they don't understand the child, what the child really needs, the provision is not there. So let's say if your child had needed speech and language, usually it is communication, it's their standard, some level of intervention. But if it's not put there stating that you need speech and language, you're not going to get it. So important that the Indian family has to have that voice. And that voice can only come if you accept, this is my child is autistic, this is the need, he cannot do this, cannot do this, can do this, and this is what we need to fight. So, picture those years. So, are we blaming primary school? No. It's because valuable time is lost. And I just want to say that I can go on, spend the whole evening about that whole provision. There are so many barriers. So the barriers an Indian family has to face here is that acceptance. Understanding that your child has a need. We have to forget about that it's karma. Yes, we all have karma and we have to pay. But God is not making us pay to having this child. So let's get that away in order for us to be, to have full acceptance. You would have other families who will say, allow the child to carry on to do what they want because it's God's gift. And then we'll find parents who are overprotective of the child. And they are overprotective because they feel it's God gift, allow them. And that's harmful for the child. It's really very harmful. Right? We treat the child with that, we don't like the word authority, but it's authoritative. You bring in your discipline in order, you make the environment in order. There are so many things you have to do. Right? And I heard the gentleman ask about training. Yeah, there is training, there are organizations, but more and more special schools need to take that mantle in their hands and actually empower the parents. Because parents need those training, and it should start from there, And whenever you feel that your child is slightly different, don't brush it off. And I know doctors or medical doctors think it's an over-anxious mom. But time is lost. It's very important. Observations, reaching different milestones. Yes, different ethnicity may have different milestones, but knowing that we are more aware of it, knowing all the things that we know, we need to take those first steps. And whatever the outcome is, there is help. And that help can only come if we learn how to accept it. So finally, I'm going to say, it's time to move away from long-standard attitudes. Our attitudes need to change. And our attitudes come, they're positive attitudes. To celebrate a birth of a child is great. Yeah? Equally, to celebrate that we've got someone different is even great. It's learning our whole mindset. First is acceptance of their diagnosis and not feel ashamed for seeking professional input. So just as an exercise last week, because I knew I was coming here, I asked some of the adults in the staff, and I wanted to know, did you have relatives or in your family someone who's older or 20 years ago? And majority of the staff members said yes, we had. We knew in this house when we visited or they visited that there was someone who we now know is autistic, but they were pushed in a room. No one brought them out. It wasn't spoken about. It was silence. Yeah? So we need to change that mindset. We need to move away, and we can. There's no such thing as we can't. We can do that. And therefore, what I'm asking is a cultural shift is necessary in order to see a reduction in behaviors in early stages of their life. Yeah? And earlier on, we spoke about intervention. Early intervention, research has proved that if you have early intervention, the outcome for the child is far better. But that early intervention cannot come if we delay the time. So delay in accepting there's something wrong, delay in navigating the system, so we have to educate. And unfortunately, not everyone speaks English, and I have found that. I have been there where I have seen interpretation of the language by interpreter saying something completely different. So we need to empower ourselves, get the right people. We just have to dig a little bit. It'll take more time to do that. But once you have that network, and if you find out from one person, there are organizations, the parent organizations, you will get the help. And I think we need to be like when the child was feeling a bit, or playing, Jock had mentioned, it's okay. We need to accept those little things that happen. A child walking or running down, it's fine. You might not think it's normal, but it's fine. If we, the society, the neurotypical, do that acceptance, then those families with children with autistic children will do the same. And we have to give them that opportunity. Who knows? Inside us, within us, there's a level of autism that we need to actually say, we need everyone. We need the diversity, and we need to celebrate that diversity. On that note, I leave you.
Namaskar, everyone. I really appreciate you came. Because of the time limit, we have to finish at 8 o'clock. So there are so many performances left. There's a panel discussion has been left. But the part 2 of this session definitely continue very soon.